Are you ready for the coolest rule book that's ever been made in the entire world? Check this sucker out. Oh my god, this book is amazing. It's actually like made to be like super old paper. Welcome everybody, Doug here with twoplustough, and today I wanted to talk about a game that I'm going to be featuring on the channel here a bit more because I'm so excited to paint the miniatures, and I like the game system quite a bit, and it's a very new thing for me. I've never really ventured too much into historical gaming, but recently I was contacted by the good folks over at Firelock Games, and their flagship game, Blood Plunder, which is this guy's rulebook, has really made a splash online, both with history nerds like myself, and also just wargamers, because it's actually a really cool system that uses very, very few numbers of units, but puts them together in a very interesting way. And so what I'd like to do in this video is just talk about the game system. If it interests you, I do have a link to their store down below. I'd love for you to use that. It's not an affiliate link yet or anything like that. I'm hoping to get one from them, but you know, I'll point you in the direction of a really cool thing. So let's talk about these guys and what is so cool about them. So I want to start off really quickly by just kind of highlighting some of the cool things that they sent me. And we're going to kick it off with this book. So real quick, I mentioned that this is their rule book, but there are two different versions. So there's the ye old rule book, which I am obsessed with. And it actually is very well made. You get these nice metallic corners here. Oh, I can't really show them. Here we go. There's one up top. And it's so fancy. It could just totally sit on like a coffee table and just look like a legitimate book. It's so stinking cool. The pages are uneven and rough cut, so they feel like, I don't know, super old paper. You can see that it's not painted to have those marks. It just like is rough paper. So this has absolutely blown me away. Would I take this to everyday game stores? Probably not. It's super pretty, but it's a little bit big. I honestly thought it was a case for something. Like when it was all sealed up, you tap it and it sounded empty, and I was like, what the hell? And then I opened it and my jaw just dropped. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But you don't have to use this one. There is actually a much more simple version right here. It's more of a traditional rulebook style. We'll use this one to flip through just because I don't want to tear the pages on the other one. So what is Blood and Plunder? Here's the short version. In the 1680s to the, early 1800s, during basically the time of the Spanish Main, which is a good map here on the front, there's a great little timeline of significant battles. This is naval and skirmish warfare in the greater Caribbean area. That's the gist of it. But you have everything from Port Royal over in Jamaica to a lot of the foundings of the New World when it comes to that. There's also indigenous people that are represented here, which I think they're done very tastefully. I'm just going to throw that out there. They have a great representation, how they worked alongside and or against various European factions. All of those things are represented well, and then also they're good. There's Tortuga, what do you got, San Juan, all these kinds of things. It's great. Essentially, it is a pirate game, okay? And I'm just going to throw that out there. You're basically all acting as pirates. This is a time in world history when all of these countries were over here trying to colonize and claim lands and seize them from locals. And then Spain was the main one in this particular region until their power started to wane, and then the Dutch, the English, and the French pretty much were like legalized piracy. People, go out there, take the territory. Spain doesn't have enough money to fight you back. If you keep it, you claim it, kind of a deal. And so this whole area was just like flush with battle and combat and blood and all these kinds of things. It makes for some epic storytelling. And just cool, I mean, just great fodder for wargaming. So that's the core idea. As you can see, this book is loaded with all kinds of incredibly cool, you know, pictures and art. One of the things that really stands out to me is the simplicity of it. Okay, when I say simplicity, what I mean is, let me pull up one of their character cards here. Here we go. So we're talking Spanish units in this one. Actually, let's go to... We're going to go to English because I can speak the names of these ones. I can pronounce these. So if we look at a standard profile, right, let's take freebooters. It gives you a brief description. Freebooters were English New Worlders from all walks of life who mastered the musketry tactics of the old French buccaneers. They were skilled in all manners of combat, possessing notable proficiency with their muskets. They're a gun unit. Perfect. Experience level, we'll get into that because it's very interesting the way that they do combat in this game. But if you look at this, there's not a lot of stats on this. There is what weapons they have, a sidearm. A sidearm just means it's a weapon you can use once per game. Usually it's like a short pistol or like a blunderbuss, something like that. You just have it in your pocket, you get charged, you use it in combat, and it's pretty much done. It makes it very simple. But then you just have fight, shoot, and resolve. Those are really your only 3 stats. Everybody moves 4 inches per movement action. You can take multiple movement actions and that kind of stuff, of course, to get across the board faster. But like stat-wise, it's a very, very streamlined game, and I appreciate that. So yeah, you can fight, you can shoot, essentially all these numbers. Let's look at the fight score right here. It's 6/6. What does that mean? All of the tests in this game are D10 based. So if you have 4 guys in this unit, you're going to roll 4 D10s. Any 6s or higher are going to be successful fight actions, and then you do damage. After the slash, the second 6 is your save. So if you're in physical combat and your opponent hits you, you get a save of a 6+ on a D10. So you can see there's some differences. Shooting, these guys will hit on a 6 or better. When it comes to their defense, if they're behind cover, they'll be at a 7. So now you have to roll a 7, 8, 9, or 10, basically. So that's just how that works. It's your offense / your defense in that same kind of combat. Really cool. The resolve is essentially your bravery. It's how well you can take orders. It's how well you handle fatigue, which is a mechanic in the game. Basically, if you overexert yourself, your guys get tired, and resolve can help you kind of put them back into the fighting spirit, kind of get a breath, if you will. And below that are special rules, and honestly, the special rules are not complicated. It's mostly stuff like, hey, if you're within 12 inches, a 10 to hit is an automatic pass or something like that. Most of it has to do with how your units move and or reload, stuff like that. There's nothing really complicated. But here's the deal. How does this get interesting, right? How do you make such simple, for lack of a better term, unit entries interesting? And the answer comes from the activation mechanics and your commanders. Okay, so I set up a little example here. We have a commander of the French army, and we have a unit of Madins, which are sort of a aggressive melee unit. They want to run up the board and get into combat as soon as possible. They have pistols instead of muskets, but you don't want to be shooting with them, right? They're really good in combat. So with the way that this game functions, normally your hero would be attached to a unit. Let's pretend he's attached to a unit that's off screen, just for the purposes of this example. At the start of the round, you and your opponent are going to draw a number of cards equal to the number of units on the table. So we're going to assume the commander's in a different unit and these guys exist. So that's 2 cards. That's because there's 2 units. And you are going to look at them. And from that point, this is how cool the game functions, okay? You and your opponent at every activation, okay, are going to put a card down. Your opponent puts a card down, and then you flip them at the same time. Based on the suit of the card, meaning clubs, hearts, diamonds, spades, or whatever, that'll determine who gets basically priority for the round. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure I had the right stuff. So the order of priority it goes, and it's actually written here. It's written very well, so you can use any type of deck of cards that you have. Just make sure you include the jokers, because those are important. But you can use any deck. This is just fancy ones that they sell to make it easier for you, like game aids. But essentially, spades will always go first, hearts second, diamonds next, and clubs last. So what we know is, if we were to play the clubs card, right, and that's the one we flipped over at the same time as our opponent, we would be activating second. We're basically choosing to go second. If we both put clubs down, then whatever the number is, so 3, that would be the tiebreaker. But you can dictate kind of like a bid for I need this to go off, I need to go now kind of a deal. That's a really nice idea. The next thing that happens is you look here and you see these are different experience levels. Every unit in the game has a different experience level, from inexperienced to trained to veteran. This is where the really cool game balance stuff comes in, and this is what I'm talking about. Because I played the club, right? Let's say it was my turn, I flipped, my opponent went, and now it's my turn to activate a unit. I'm going to activate my Marines. Well, if I look at their unit entry, I can see here they have an experience level of trained. So, looking at our card, and again, like I said, all of this information is in the core rules to be translated to normal playing cards. I'm just doing this because it's written on the card and it's very simple. Trained units get 3 actions. So if I did this and I choose to activate a trained unit, they get 3 actions, which normally in action economy games, you only ever get 2 plus some bonus actions. Bonus actions also exist in this game. So you could have a unit skyrocket across the board and just be a menace based on the number of actions that you can give them. Now, if you compare that to the other card that we put down, our heart, well, this one would activate first, right? You're putting in that higher bid because hearts activate before clubs. But if you look, it does fewer actions. So you're rewarded with more actions by going later after your opponent, and you're incentivized if you want to steal initiative. You get fewer actions, but you get them when you want them. You go first. So if you're in combat, well, you would want to go first because your only action is going to be attacking, right? So that would be a situation where you want the initiative. So you would go with a spade or a heart because those are higher. But if you want to get dudes up the board, meaning multiple move actions, have them reload and then fire, all that kind of stuff, you need more action economy to be able to do that. So you're going to go later and get that. So that is a really neat balancing act. When I first read through the rules, I'm like, okay, you're bidding to see who goes first, but what's the real risk if you go second? And it's just you're rewarded with more actions. So there's this constant pull between you and your opponent for who goes first, and then how many actions does that unit get to take. This happens all the time. So at the beginning of the round, you're going to draw as many cards as there are dudes in your army, and you're going to put a card down, flip. The person with initiative then activates a unit, then the opponent. Then you start over again, put another card down, flip. Now the person with initiative activates their units, then their opponents go. And then you just keep doing that. And it actually makes a game very, very simple. If you have a unit destroyed, so let's say these guys just poof, disappear, you could, instead of laying a card down, this is a really cool mechanic where you lay a card down, your opponent lays a card down, then when you go to flip, you go, I'm going to pass this turn. Which is like the best bait and switch ever, because you're still forcing them to have to bid on, you know what I mean? If you know that they want the initiative in something, you're forcing them to use a higher initiative card instead of using one that would give them more action economy. So you can really play with your opponent quite a bit. It's a really unique setup for a game that I think is totally legit. Now, there's a bunch of stuff when it comes to, cover and like range modifiers and all these kinds of things, but the core of the game is you get a bunch of dudes. Your commanders make up an inordinate amount of your army, to be honest, points-wise. And it can just be a very simple skirmish game, or you can turn this into something truly epic, and I'll show you what I mean. But as far as the skirmish stuff goes, we look here and we see that the Marines are 4 points. The size of your game dictates the minimums and maximum sizes of each of your squads. So if you're playing a 100-point game, the minimum size for these guys, I believe, is going to be 4. So this starter pack is a unit. If you play really, really large games, that'll go up to, like, I think 5 or 6. And then on the high end of, like, max size units, I think it's like 12 or 16, something like that. The truth is you don't need a lot of minis to actually start playing this game. If we have a look, we'll go back here to the commanders section. Your commanders take up a good bulk of points. Let's talk about them for a bit. So, whenever a commander is attached to a unit, and that unit is chosen to activate, okay? So they all activate together, they're all going to move together, they're all going to do all that stuff together. The commander is essentially a special rules monster that is attached to an existing unit. You could go the way of an aspiring leader, we'll say, untested, 0 points. They're totally free, but they do like nothing for your army. I don't know why you would do it, but you can. The high end of cool things is a seasoned veteran of a commander, which is going to be 25 points. So again, if you're playing 100 points, it's a quarter of your list is this leader who has to be a part of a unit. So you can see how it would eat up points real fast. And at that point, they get, you know, the cool loadout as far as special rules that they add to your army, cool weapons that they bring. But the big thing is command points. Command points are cool. Essentially, when the unit that the commander is a part of is active, they can use command points as long as they're in the designated command range that is put on the entry right here down below. He can basically allow other units to act in their turn. So let's set up an example. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so let's pretend that we have our unit of Marines and we have our French commander with them. And over here is a unit of Buccaneers. They are sort of the long rifle unit of the French army. And for this example, we are using a seasoned commander. Actually, yeah, let's go seasoned commander here with 2 command points. We flip the cards. Let's say we gain initiative. It's our turn to activate. We choose the Marines unit. Okay, the Marines or whatever you want to call them, however you pronounce it. Because it's their activation and the commander is in that unit, he can spend command points to make other units within his command range, which if you are a seasoned leader is 16 inches, so a pretty big bubble from this guy, to activate outside of their turn. So a cool example of this is, let's pretend these guys have already shot. Okay, they took their turn, they laid down some cover fire because the enemy was far away and they got long-range guns. Good strategy. Now they need to reload those guns. So he can spend an order in this unit's activation time to give them the free action of reloading their guns so that next turn they're ready to fire again. That's thinking ahead. You could also give them an order to move in this turn, which is super nice because if the enemy's over here, these guys are in the way. So in their turn, they get the order to move. They move 4 inches. Now, Unit A can see straight through and cross over to here. You can do this to multiple units as many times as you have orders. Or command points, not orders, I apologize. But it makes for some very deep tactical play. Who you have your commander attached to, what they want to do, and how you move your units around with command points and their kind of stuff is just really, really interesting to me. There's a lot of very technical play that can go into this, or it could be super simple. You know, you could just have him constantly making them reload or, you know, charge forward, whatever, like, or just do extra movement actions to move up the board. You could use it as much as you want or as little as you want. But the really neat thing is if you can set up these really interesting scenarios where, you know, commanders are moving units to gain cover, to lose cover, to, you know what I mean? Like there's just some really nice stuff in there that is really exciting. And for reference, when it comes to the size of the game, because, you know, cost is a huge deal right now, especially with everything that's going on. Price hikes with GW products and just the way that the world is right now when it comes to manufacturing. What you're looking at here, this is... he came with them in the set that I had. And then this is a second blister box. This is, I think, 69 points or 70 points, if I did my math right. And you can start playing immediately. Like, there's no... There are point increments, but it's more of a sliding scale to let you play the game size that you want. So you could play below 100 points. 100 points is sort of the first marker where they start bolting on, like, you know, unit size minimums and that kind of stuff. So this is a playable army, straight up. If you want to play at the smallest size possible, that the game is balanced around, 100 points I think is pretty normal. 200 I think is a good size skirmish game. Bigger games are going to have obviously a lot more units. So, but I'm saying is that very few models. You know, you go to their website, and because they are mini, because they are, sorry, mini, they're metal. Because they are metal, because they are made in the US, because Firelock Games is in Florida, they're going to seem pricey, but the truth is, to get into Firelock Games, you know, Blood and Plunder is exceptionally low cost when compared to a lot of full mass army games. It is nice. It is really nice. You know, they sent me some stuff. I'm going to go on and I'm going to buy some more because it is affordable. It is a great alternative. They are metal models. They are really nice. They have a 20 mil base that they all have. It's like a nice etched wooden thing. The detail's great. You can look up pictures online. Obviously, if you're not a fan of these and you want a plastic option, there are a myriad of historical kits that will work with this game system. So if the models are your only hang-up, there's a million options. It's a great game rule set. I'll say that. What else do we want to touch on? Oh yeah, the coolest thing. So when you get into the bigger stuff, let's take a look here. This is the chapter where it's all about. Like, so you're trying to create this pirate combat game, right? You could play on a 3x3 with just a couple of dudes on foot and they're just trying to thrash each other. Historically, it happened a bunch. Bunch of dudes with guns got together and just picked a fight. History. But if you want to bring it up a level, in the core rules, it's not essential to the gameplay. So I'm going to make that very clear. This whole section is like ancillary stuff that is just as much a part of the setting and the game system, but it's not required to play. Okay? Just making that very clear. You can do either naval assaults, like amphibious assaults, where if you have a board that's like 3x4, part of it's water. They recommend like 25% of the board be water so you can actually like maneuver your boat around. But you can put them on a boat and have them beach, get off, and then attack the land stuff, which is the coolest. I mean, talk about historical gaming and recreating great moments in combat. That's really cool. I've seen very few games that can, interestingly enough, represent amphibious combat. Or you can just do ship to ship where they're trying to kill each other and you can board and that kind of stuff. So let me show you what these ships look like. Okay, so this is the box for the bark. Just a very simple vessel that you can load your guys into, as you can see on the picture here. The only thing that it doesn't come with that's here on the picture is the sails. And I'm going to try to make my own and I'll report on how I did it, okay? But basically what it is a very well detailed resin boat. I mean, for the heck of it, you know, you got a flat bottom so they can just kind of move across the table nice and easy. There are also in here, you have all your sail poles, I should say, as well as all of the rigging. And so the rigging is actual rope and a bunch of little MDF things. You're just going to put those on the boat with all the masts and tie it all together. There's instructions online for how to do that. But also in this little bag are a whole bunch of turrets that go on the side, like to shoot grape shot and stuff like that, as well as huge cannons that'll like dock themselves at the main gun ports. So like, it's a cool little kit. I like it. It's a little bit bare. I wish there was something when it came to the sail, but I mean, if that's the worst I can say about it, you know, whatever. It to me is like the epitome of that historical gamer aspect where it's like you want to fully customize all this stuff for historical accuracy. Anyway, so we have our cool little boat. Also in there are these really helpful things where you can essentially get a diagram that shows you all the information about your boat. The essential takeaway when it comes to the ship stuff, one, it is a bolt-on rule set that goes along with the skirmish things, meaning I wouldn't start with boats. I would start with just the guys on foot, learn the game system, okay? When you are ready to get into boats, like it's some exciting thing, they actually function very much the same in terms of, you know, you're making D10 tests with modifiers. It doesn't change drastically. What does is that you then have to keep track of which direction the wind is blowing, because that's going to affect your ship's speed, how fast they can turn. And then there's just traits that go along with all of them, and you can see where the gun ports are. This might look intimidating with all the little O's and that kind of thing. All it's doing is keeping track of how many reload actions you need to do. Okay, so depending on if you just go all out and you just unleash hell with all of the guns, then you'll need time to reload them all. Whereas if you just, you know, fire half the shots from here, you can really split up fire. Even with units on foot, you can choose for half the unit to shoot and half not, so that you don't have to reload everything. The point is, all of this is just giving you more control over like how you captain your ship. It's not meant to be overwhelming. There's actually very little information here. This is just a damage chart. This is just a damage chart for the hull and the rigging respectively. You can keep track of what guns need to be reloaded, and that's about it. Other than that, you can just choose what setting your sail is at. That'll determine your speed. And then there's some special rules for them. That's it. And that's pretty cool. If you look on here, this is basically your build guide. You know, that's all there is to it. It just kind of explains to you how this all works. And I think this is just an insert they generally throw into everything. Yeah, to be able to show you where the rigging goes and basically how the lines connect and that kind of stuff. So this would be the one we would want. We would throw out, we would put up as many of these as we want, as many of the masts as we want. And then it just shows you here's where the rigging goes to connect them all to make it look right. But I like this idea, right? Because then you can have guys who are like on ground, and you can do, like I said, an amphibious assault, which is you take your boat and you basically beach it on shore. You just crash in, and then your guys can pile off of it. Even when they're off of it, there are guns here that can be fired as long as you have dudes near them to reload them and use them. Just like in real life. Yeah, but you can depart the boat. Or if you have two of them, which, thank you, Firelock Games, they sent me a second one. I have a French and a Dutch army at this moment. If they're both moving across the board, they can actually grapple each other, like throw a hook and grapple, and pull up, and then you can actually fight your skirmish game boat to boat. So not only are your boats in combat, but maybe one of them doesn't have a whole lot of guns and is just trying to speedily get as close as they can to the bigger one to try and hopefully board it. So that's a perfectly reasonable outcome. If you can't outgun the boat, try to outgun the people on it. Makes sense. And so, you know, for that, the reason I don't want to get too much into the weeds with the boats thing, because it's definitely the part of the game I'm the least familiar with. I know the big things are the weather, which way the wind's blowing, how that affects your ship. But the fact that it is a ancillary part of the game, it's not required. Most games, you don't ever have to touch the boats, okay? Ever. But built into the core game engine is the idea of this is fundamentally a part of the world where naval warfare was very important. And so it's not like, I guess, you know how some games, like let's talk about Necromunda. Necromunda is a skirmish game from GW, and they have their core game where you're just a bunch of dudes, you know, I call them dirt people, all trying to kill and eat each other to survive. And then in addition, they're also coming out later with an expansion to have vehicles, right? That is a bolt-on to an existing rule set. It'll need balance problems, all this kinds of stuff. It'll need monitoring to see how well it does. Whereas with this, the vehicle rules, meaning boats, are baked in just into the core game engine of how the thing works. And I like that a lot. You can do anything with these that you can imagine. If you are a suicidal captain and you just want to like, everything is ramming speed or not, that's cool. You're not gonna have a boat for very long. There are critical damage rolls and that kind of stuff. Like your boat will take damage and it can sink. But it sounds like a cool story. You know, I mean, honestly, this all just makes me want to play like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but I love it. So you are going to see me painting up some grimdark looking historical minis here on the channel. Huge thanks to Firelock Games for sending me this out. I was so interested. I went to their, I was originally part of their Facebook group for Blood Plunder, and I just messaged on, you know, one of their comments, one of the admin comments, like, hey, I have a YouTube channel. I would love to talk about this. This is so cool. And they reached out, and it's been nothing but great. So they're really cool to work with, very responsive when it comes to customer service and stuff. They also sent me another game called Oak and Iron, which is essentially the ship combat, but just that. So it is using very, very small scale model ships, but just pure naval combat. And I have this vision, if you will, of doing a game where every single time those two ships interact, I actually do a ship battle with the Blood and Plunder guys. I think that would be kind of cool as like a mega campaign. We'll see how it actually pans out, but it could be a really cool idea. And certainly something that if you and a buddy want to get into the game, you know, and you're both historical wargamers, a cool thing that you can do. Side note, I also want to create a creepy Cthulhu expansion for this. That's just my dream. But yeah, this video is just meant to be kind of an overview of like things that are out there. You take very simple design concepts, which is what I will say about this game. All the units and stuff, it's all simple, right? Like they're not complicated in and of themselves, but the interesting and the dynamic parts of the game come from how you choose to order your units, meaning literally like the order in which you go, how you bid for initiative versus how many actions you can get, how your ship is doing, you know, I mean, like who your commander is, how they can order troops around, their morale, all these kinds of things go into creating some really cool, like, narrative moments. So if the game interests you at all, go ahead and click the link and at least take a look at the miniatures, take a look at the rule set. Like I said, if you're really not into their models, that's fine. This book is everything you need to play. This and a standard deck of cards as well as some D10s, and you're all set. Like it's a nice, simple rule set. And I, you know, personally, I think the models are awesome. I'm going to be expanding by buying a few more Marins for the French army that I have and that kind of stuff. So if you want to follow along, do so. Thank you so much for listening to me rant about a cool game that I found because, you know, me, shiny new thing, I fall in love with it, and here I am. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work on these guys, and I hope that you would join me for some content in the future regarding Blood and Plunder. Thank you all for watching. Happy wargaming.